We've seen demons, we've seen trains, but now it's time for mechas, magma cannons, and bulls on parade. The ancient rivalry between Dwarf and Chaos Dwarf comes to the fore in modern day, as Astragoth leads the Dawizar against Ironfist and Ironbreaker. The big question many are asking, does this new DLC race somehow invalidate the Dwarfs as a faction because of their power and versatility? Well, it's not going to be answered in a single replay regardless, but I will give you guys fair warning. The start of this match is very lopsided, and then things get crazy. Trust me when I say you don't know how this ends, nor do you want to. Just sit back and enjoy the show. So, for the Disciples of Hashut, Father of Darkness, the High Priest Astragoth Ironhand is slowly turning into stone from all his maledictions, so he needs a walker and a subscription to Life Alert to help him when he's fallen and he can't get up. He's a mixed lorecaster of Hashut and Fire, Ashstorm, Firestorm, and Hellhammer in this one, with mechanical overdrive's diabolical ingenuity driving his mecha to greater acts of slaughter the more he kills. I think most people who have dabbled in multiplayer on this build agree Astragoth is probably the best of the three new lords in combat. He is exceptionally hard to kill, and his stat line's quite a bit more impressive than you'd expect from a caster lord, even one in a spindly ATST prototype. You'll have support from Great Weapon Infantry against the Dawi, of course, and the mighty Bale Taurus, a powerful flaming monster with breath attacks, damage reflection, and resistance from its blazing body, and a rambunctious role as a backline disruptor and devastating cycle charger. I still don't know what I think about melee reflection as a mechanic. I've never been able to gauge how impactful it is on monsters like this one, but I do know blazing body was a mortis effect on tabletop, and it's maybe a good thing it didn't get one. Do not attempt to lasso and ride this mount to impress the country girls. It may result in 4th degree burns. For artillery, there will be 2 magma cannons, which in my limited experience thus far, seem like the best unit in the entire roster, at least when it comes to fulfilling their role. They are deadly, extremely accurate from max distance, and leave a vortex of flame behind once their salvos make impact. They're even good versus SEMs and monsters as well, from what I can tell. They can equip the Hellbound trait to give them physical resist, which can be helpful in artillery duels against dwarf cannons. The backline are 3 Chaos Dwarf blunderbusses, which can tear apart most units at close range, and a vanguard contingent of hobgoblin cutthroats whose job it is basically just to die so their betters can live. They do have some fun little passives though for doing a bit of backstabbery. It was a bit of an unfair map here in the Darklands, but HDS still wanted to play it with his dwarfs. He's got 2 cannons on the downslope of the hill, a master engineer with flash bomb and restock, so that could be very useful against the blazing body of the Bale Taurus. Just snare it in place and have it shot to pieces. He's got 3 Quarrelers, 2 Thunderers, a unit of Hammerers for some shock power and AP on the charge, and Nurglemling's Ironbreakers with their massive health pool and armor. In the rear is the Slayer King of Karak Kadrin himself, Giant Slayers protecting their liege, and that is going to be the Dwarf build. Chaos Dwarfs are going to be coming down the hill, and the fiery passion between these 2 races will be reignited in earnest. It is not war that comes, but Astragoth and Ungrim, an intense burning love that can bloom on any battlefield. Kicking things off will be the Magma Cannon. Seem to excel in the anti-infantry department. They have massively outperformed the Death Shriekers in my experience, and because the Ironbreakers and Hammers are already in range, they will be the first victims of the opening salvos. The most surprising element of Magma Cannons is their accuracy. They only have 1 model, so the calibration area on their projectile seems very small to make up for that, and that means often pinpoint accurate shots from across the map that then leave a burning pile of residue that sucks in nearby models, kind of like a mini pit of shades. So it deals damage over time, as well as explosive damage on initial impact, and it means that when they land a flush shot, it is pain. Hammers are feeling that big time. They'll be forced off. 2 shots already taking them down to half health, and you can see some of those models being caught in the inferno as they attempt to pull away, which just leads to even more burning. So HDS will wisely decide to move all his elite infantry out of range, but he can't cede his position too much here because this is the flattest part of the map. What will follow is a systematic bracketing of the dwarf's most important units, individually being targeted by the 2 magma cannons on the ridge above, and they are not in the mood for mercy. Chaos Dwarfs are not fast, they don't need to be, and at least for the moment, they are winning this artillery duel pretty handily, so they're in no rush to close into CQB. Bale Taurus flying out to the flank, Astragoth Ironhand, High Priest of Hashut, also moving out to the flank to set up for some nice Hellhammers down the length of those infantry regiments. And those magma cannons, you can see in the background, are just causing so much damage. They don't seem to be missing. Yeah, the Dwarf cannons are firing back, but at the moment they're just killing Hobgoblins and a few Chaos Dwarf infantry. not really a big deal. Meanwhile, the dwarfs are just getting pooped on. Their range units being obliterated from the hilltop, which, to be fair, may partially be due to the terrain advantage. Being able to shoot down from a higher angle may be helping them somewhat. Might require additional testing there, but as I said, the opening stages of this battle were very lopsided, and at this point, I was already thinking, this might be a very easy win. Spoiler alert, it was not, but it doesn't look like it right now. Thunderers are breaking off. They haven't shot a single bullet yet, and they're already dead. Hammers are down to half HP. Quarrelers are now being targeted, but the magma cannons have not focused on the anti-artillery role quite yet. That's why the great Bale Taurus is moving out to the flank. It might dive into the rear. Only a couple slayers to protect their back line, and Quarrelers are routing too. God, those magma cannons are just disgustingly brutal. One shot did that. Basically routed them off. I mean, not even basically. That was literally one shot that took them down to 1/3 of their remaining health. Now, they did the wrong thing, which was move forward into the vortex, which you don't want to do because that will cause a lot of extra damage. Nice Hellhammer coming in from the flank to deal with the Dwarf Warriors in the front ranks as the Blunderbeesiuses move into range, and the Bale Taurus charges in from the flank straight onto the artillery crews, and those cannons do not have a lot of support or help right now. Hellhammer is a really cool looking spell, by the way, kind of like a Penumbral Pendulum. Hasn't blown me out of the water in terms of its damage output, but if you get an overcast into a bunch of armored infantry blobbed up, it will definitely cause some carnage. But if you want to talk about real carnage, look no further than the Blazing Cow, exploiting the hole left by the Slayers as they over-pursued against some retreating Hobgoblins, and now has free reign to rampage on the cannon crews, and though with most monsters, they usually take a while to rout them off, whereas a cav or monstrous infantry charge into artillery crews would deal with them in seconds, so see how long that takes. Big time blasting charge from Nurgling's Ironbreakers, and that is the first sign that the dwarfs might try to get back into this game. They've had a rough go of it so far, but that blasting charge got those blunderby down. The blunderbussies. I need to stop. Oh my god. That shot, those volleys, first the magma cannon, then the blunderbuss, and they are absolutely taking the Nurglings to Pound Town. And the Dawi Zar will rally around their family with a pocket full of shells and reload animations with a sure shot. Sure to make the bodies drop. Ironbreakers dropping in the dozens. And a point-blank volley from them. Not what you want to experience if you are any kind of infantry or monster or cav or anything in the game. They cause many pains. But the Hammers are doing a great job against the Chaos Dwarf Great Weapon units. I don't think the Ironbreakers are going to be around for too much longer. They're actually potentially being protected a little bit by the slope of that hill. Blasting charges up over the crest of it, dealing some damage back, but they're running out of impetus and they're probably going to just rout at this point. Those hammers are going to be a big problem for the Chaos Dwarf infantry, and yeah, continuous blasting charges up the hill. 2 units of Chaos Dwarf Blunderbuss have been brought down to half health or lower just from Nurglings and their tossed grenades. But do remember too that the Lore of Fire has been visually reworked and Flamestorm has been reworked as a spell. It has a lot less veering off potential now, which means it does a much better job of staying on target, and you'll ideally get more use out of the spell. Definitely caused some carnage there amongst the Dwarf Quarrelers. Bale Taurus is fighting some Slayers, while Ungrim Ironfist pushes on towards the Blunderbuss, and they have to retreat back up the hill. They've already lost all their infantry for the most part. Hobgoblins didn't stick around for very long. Another nasty shot from the magma cannon up top, making sure those Thunderers do not return. But the Bale Taurus and Astragoth are perfectly fine, and what they're going to do is kind of fight a running retreat back up the hill as the dwarfs give chase. They've got some time to unleash their breath attacks, and Astragoth, of course, has 60 speed, so plenty of mobility to cycle charge. I will point out, though, this was my first multiplayer battle with Astragoth, and I thought he was a large unit, so I did not want to duel Ungrim with him. He's actually infantry. Kind of doesn't make that much sense because he's on a mecha and he's 7 or 8 feet tall. Definitely more monstrous infantry size, and of course those classify as large targets. But Astragoth is infantry size. He's a footlord, so he has no issues fighting Ungrim in melee. I'm not going to treat it that way. I was very reticent to get anywhere near Ungrim Ironfist and basically only cycle charge him here. But just because the Axe of Dargo won't get its additional bonus versus large, doesn't mean that Ungrim can't still beat him in a duel. probably can't, just because he has much less HP. I think Astragoth has close to 8,000. Ungrim would be more around 5k. But I would be curious how that would shake out in the long run. Big charge coming in from the Bale Taurus into the Hammers. They're terrified. They're going to break off. But the Dwarfs have a lot more bodies on the field right now, despite the balance bar being pretty heavily in favor of the Disciples of Hashut. Ash Storm coming down. Again, imbuing weakness to Flame. Very common tactic with the Chaos Dwarfs, and as I've said before, I think Ash Storm is probably the best spell in the lore of Hashut. So, beautiful point-blank volley from the Chaos Dwarf Blunderbuss. Astragoth dealing 20% extra damage. Oh my lord. You cannot mess around with the shotguns. They are terrifying. If you get slowed, if they get a point-blank volley in, you're going to be deleted, and that's frankly what you want to see from shotgun units. We haven't always seen that with some of the other ones that have been introduced in this trilogy, but the blunderbusses definitely bring that to the fore, and really fun to get a point-blank volley in and just completely dumpster a unit. Astragoth gonna chase after the Engineer. Bale Taurus using its flaming wings to harry and harass the back line, and frankly maybe should have stayed there to deal with the Dwarf Cannons and the Quarrelers and just rout them. But he sees that a lot of his blunderbuss are kind of being under assault right now. The Dwarfs are pushing forward with all their infantry straight up the hill into the fire arc of these remaining cannons and shotgun units. But there are a lot of bodies, and the blunderbuss might have difficulty killing all of them. Another big blasting charge volley from Norgrimlings. They've kind of stuck around. They've been very resolute, very stubborn in the way that you'd like to see from your Dwarfs. And even though they only have 12 models remaining, they are still causing problems for the Chaos Dwarf range troops. And now the Hammers are charging up the hill directly into the most healthy remaining shotgun unit. And they're going to hold their ground here. They have blades affixed to the back of their stocks. They can use those in CQB. And they can also, if they're in guard mode, fire at point-blank range. And that's devastating. Really good magma cannon shot to help out, even though there's probably a little bit of friendly fire there. You can see Chaos Dwarfs burning too. But the hammer charge will be blunted and negated and ultimately eviscerated. That's some Fall of Samurai stuff right now. Charging in for glorious melee combat, and the shotguns just say, nope, welcome to the 21st century, bitches. Deleted from the game. Well, there's actually 21 models remaining. I'm not sure how that's even possible, but they're gonna rout once they get into combat anyway. Ungrim is now dropping very low. More shotguns getting fantastic volleys in on these high HP, important single entities. And Giant Slayers with a full surround off on the blazing body of that Bale Taurus. And this is a dangerous situation. It had infantry support not moments ago, but those infantry have routed now, and the Giant Slayers have turned their undivided attention towards the massive single entity monster. Astragoth is charging in to reinforce, but the Bale Taurus, who had about 5,500 health remaining, now has 3,000, and that only took a couple of seconds, and it almost routed. And not only that, it tried to pull away, and the stagger animations from the Giant Slayers kept preventing it from escaping. So it took a bunch of extra damage, and that is a painful loss for the Chaos Dwarfs here. The unit is still around, it is still alive, but it does not have a lot of health remaining, and the cannons are firing into it. The remnants of the Quarrelers and the Thunderers are firing into it too, and the Engineer just dropped a flash bomb on it, minus 60% speed. It's now going to be very difficult for it to dodge any of its ranged fire as it goes after the cannons. Not a whole lot of LD left on that thing. You can see it wavering in the background. Meanwhile, Ungrim Ironfist is just doing exactly what you'd expect from the Slayer King. Him and a handful of angry Mohawk stunties slicing their way through anything they can get their hands on. Bale Taurus just routed to the cannons and Quarreler fire. That slow from Flash Bomb really messed it up, and suddenly we've got a battle here, boys. It felt like we were just calling the Dwarfs' name this entire time, saying, oh, they're getting exploded left, right, and center. And they were, but they have crawled their way back into it, and a big fire tornado onto the Quarrelers to rout them off as Astragoth goes for a duel against that Engineer. Wasn't able to chase him off the last time, maybe not going to make that same mistake again. We will see, but there are multiple units here that Astragoth may have to divide his attention towards. When you look at the Quarrelers, especially that cannon firing in as he unleashes the flamethrower on his wrist, so freaking cool. Well, he can't just let himself get shot by the cannon, so he can't spend forever trying to kill that Master Engineer. if he's being shot to pieces by other units. So he may need to let that engineer come back. Now, the cool thing about magma cannons too, they can defend themselves in melee. They have steam release, kind of like the Iron Demon War Engine, and they actually have 200 weapon strength, which is very different than most other artillery in the trilogy, of course. So they're actually going to kill a lot of Slayers as they chunk in. Giant Slayers down to 8 models, only 244 HP remaining. But finally, both magma cannons have been silenced, and the Axe of Dargo will bite deep one more time. It will explode in a janky animation, and we are going to be left with just Astragoth Ironhand representing the disciples of Hashut. And this is one of my, we've talked about some, oh, that's such a cool, okay. What is that? Like a roundhouse kick? That's incredible. I really don't like how chasing after routing units is just so impossible for so many lords and monsters and characters. Like, 90 HP, he's got 60 melee attack, he's attacking in the rear, and he just can't strike that killing blow. It takes forever to kill anything routing in this game, but finally he's gonna say, screw it, I don't care, I'm gonna drop a Flamestorm on the cannon and ensure that they stop shooting. Cannon's actually a big reason why he's a little bit lower than he would otherwise be. I think he'd be closer to half HP right now if that cannon hadn't been firing into him unmitigated for the last 2 minutes or so. Really like the visuals on the new Flamestorm, and definitely seems to be performing a little bit better too. Not veering off into the sunset, staying on target and kind of messing up those crews. Engineer's now down to 84 HP. I think it took 6 damage from a Quarreler bolt. The cannon didn't rout, so Astragoth now has to close into melee and finish it off for good. He cannot go after the engineer, which means that NG may return. But the balance of power still in favor of the Chaos Dwarfs, which goes to show you just how powerful Astragoth is. And he is. He's got 3,000 health remaining and a ridiculous stat line, 67 MA, 50 MD, and 500 weapon strength. A lot of that being built up from those mechanical overdrive buffs. And the artillery crew finally say, I don't want to be here anymore. They're going to run. So you may have noticed when Astragoth was moving towards the cannon crews there too, he was moving on the outside of their fire arc and constantly forcing them to reposition, which meant they weren't firing. So good movement from him to dodge those shots and retain as much HP as he can for these final duels. He now has a choice. Does he go after Ungrim, the Slayers, or after the Quarrelers? And looking back on it, I might have wanted to go after the Slayers, but again, I'm treating Astragoth like he is a large lord. So either way you want to look at it, I don't think avoiding the Slayers and charging the Quarrelers is a bad idea. He still has a bigger hitbox than a regular Footlord. He's still taller. He can still get shot pretty easily over the top of things. So going after the Quarrelers to try to rout them does make a lot of sense, but we can't cycle charge them into oblivion here. We need to take a fight, which means he's going in against Ungrim, breathing flame into his red mohawk, and as those Quarreler bolts shoot in at point-blank range, Astragoth is still going to work and still killing Quarrelers behind the Slayer King as he unleashes the flamethrowers on his wrists. So 4 Slayers remaining, handful of Quarrelers who could rout off at any time. Ungrim Ironfist taking the duel here, and I was surprised. I was like, why is Astragoth doing so well in this duel? If he was a monster lord, he would have already routed off. That is when I realized that he is actually infantry sized. And he's killing everything right now. He is doing a great job, but he's wavering and he's fighting an unbreakable lord, and one last swing from the Axe of Dargo will put him down, and the Dwarfs will snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. It looked so miserable for them for those first 5 or 6 minutes, but they stabilized. They attacked with all the infantry they had remaining. They went up that hill. They utilized their Nurglings, Ironbreakers, the remnants of them, to perfection. Got some great blasting charge volleys into the blunderbusses. It did make it harder for them to stay alive in those mid and late game battles where they could have really turned the tides. Magma Cannons were MVP this game, there's no question in my mind. 1,500 value each, easy. One of them got up to 1,800. Just, they were the reason the Dwarfs were on the back foot for most of that battle. The Chaos Dwarf infantry didn't perform that well, but they were against hammers and Ironbreakers, so not particularly surprising. I think the big turning point in that battle was the blunder with the Bale Taurus, which it wasn't a bad play, right? Like, there was infantry there supporting them against the Giant Slayers. That is when you want to engage the Slayers and kill them off, because I wasn't going to have enough range troops to shoot them to death. But as soon as my blunderbuss started routing, and the Bale Taurus no longer had any infantry support, it needed to run. and I noticed it a little bit too late, and it was just seconds, and it was just absolutely shredded. I did get Astragoth in there afterwards, and looking back on it, of course, wouldn't have been treating Astragoth like a large lord. I would have treated him like an infantry-sized one. He could have engaged the giant slayers first, tanked all the damage from them, and then the Bale Taurus comes in from behind to kill them off, and that probably would have worked pretty well, but any single entity fighting giant slayers by itself is always going to be scary, and they needed to be dealt with. But either way, super entertaining battle, really enjoyed it, and I hope you guys did too.